Today's webinar is on what does a good session look like. To present this session, I've got with me Clive, Grant and Gemma Newman. I hope you enjoy this webinar and I'll hand over to Gemma. Gemma.
Hello everybody, my name is Gemma Newman and this is Bob. Bob is an instructor and is generally very good at it. But sometimes his sessions are a bit of a flop. He finds that things go wrong and then he ends up spending most of the session trying to fix all of the problems. So not much learning takes place and his students get bored. Bob doesn't know how to make his sessions better and thinks it's just really bad luck. So he gives up instructing and moves to a remote island. The local wildlife know of his shame, but at least they don't judge. Poor Bob. Luckily, we can fix that and make Bob happy, because it's often the case that sessions are not as good as they can be because they haven't been adequately planned. So let's have a look at the advantages of planning. Now, I'm not a fan of planning. It's not something I get excited about, but I do recognise the merits of a well thought out plan. So firstly, writing out a plan forces the instructor to consider all of the details and spot potential pitfalls before they happen. And so there should be less issues when the session is running. Planning also gives instructors peace of mind, and then they can concentrate on the delivery and on their students' learning, not trying to work things out as they go. And once we follow a formula for planning and get into a routine, then it becomes automatic and much quicker and easier. So the planning gets less, we get better, and so do the sessions. So where do we start? The aim should be defined right at the start because it gives us the bones or the framework to the session. If that's kept in mind throughout, then it should be easy to meet at the end. There should be some logical progression, and this can be found from doing some research in G14 and the logbooks to ascertain what the student already knows. So it's vital to know the methods and the syllabus and what has gone before and what they cannot yet do. So, for example, getting students to do a follow the leader to a sailing area when they haven't tacked yet, that would be unsuitable. So it's particularly common in role play situations, so something to be mindful of while you're doing your course. From looking at the publications, it should be easy to know whether it's realistic and whether it's achievable, and whether we're pitching it correctly to the students and the environment that we have. So it needs to be the right level. Next, we can start to flesh it out, taking notes from G14 and the handbooks of the key teaching points. These are the main points that we must include, and they must be covered in the session. Ensure they are accurate and that the correct terms are used as well. And lastly, the method of what we're covering in this session should be defined, or the skill. It's a good idea to think about why the students need to learn the skill and how it can be taught. So there may be several options here, and in making a decision, we may need to start thinking about the bigger picture. So with the aim, key points and methods clearly in mind, we'll just put those at the top. Let's go into a bit more detail. The points to remember can be broken down into three areas: environment, equipment, and students. So for environment, we want to create or maintain an environment that's suitable for learning. Imagine what a perfect scenario is to start with, and then start adapting it to what's available and what we have. Equipment should be checked and prepped and in situ, ready to use. And for students, the aim is for safe, enjoyable learning to take place. These three aspects, safe, enjoyable learning, are what we would use to measure the success of a session. So it's vital when we plan it that each aspect is checked against these criteria. So breaking down into more detail, let's start with environment. And we need to give some focus to each location. So let's start with a shore. So hazards. Ideally, we'd want to eliminate these altogether, but if not, can they be managed and what can be done? Launching. Where is the best place to launch at the centre? There might be several options, not all of them obvious. We want to look for sites that are the least busy, safe, not slippery, and we need to be mindful of lee shores. So launch locations might change for different sessions and change as students progress. So again, refer back to what the student already knows, as it might open up some further options. Distractions, again, can we eliminate them or do we need to manage them? Is there a lot of noise? Are there other sessions running? Is it worse at different times? So maybe we can just change things around a little. Moving on to sailing area, we'd look at the conditions, so tides and weather. Have you checked them from a reliable source as well? Are the conditions safe for my students' level, and is there high wind or exposure? If not, how will we manage it? And what impact are the conditions going to have on the session? Will there be enough water? Will there be too much current? Waves, gusts, making it difficult or even unachievable? So we're relating all the time back to our targets at the top. So hazards, local area hazards, moorings and other obstacles, thinking above and below. Traffic and channels. Traffic can be really quite unpredictable, but speak to a local because I'm sure they'll know when the rush hours are. So distance and size. How far away is your desired sailing area from the centre? Is it feasible in the time given? We don't want a situation where most of the time is spent on logistics and not on actually learning the skill. Also, is it big enough for the type of activity and for the number of boats? As a general rule, the faster the boats are going, the more space we'll need. So on the flip side of that, is it too big and will any learning take place at all? Moving on to the course now. So directly related to the sailing area, you might want to control the group with a course. However, not all sessions best run with a course. Spinnakers, for example, a strict course may do more harm than good. Sometimes goalposts and area perimeters work much better, because if you're setting a course with a very strict broad reach, for a beginner spinnaker session, they would need to launch the kite and set it really efficiently, not to end up going dead downwind at the end. So we don't really want that. And also we want to make sure that courses and perimeters end well before any hazardous area starts. So if a course is set, is it suitable for the activity? Has G14 been checked for the recommended courses? There are some illustrations for a lot of sessions in the publication, so have a look at that. Size again. There is sometimes a compromise between safety and learning. For example, jibing, if we think about the G14 course for single-handed first jibes, it has the potential to be laid quite large and therefore lots of sailing and not enough jibing. Ideally, if it's close to the briefing area, we'd like to lay the course beforehand. However, with caution, because wind shifts and changes mean that they can, again, do more harm than good, and they'll most definitely need checking again once you're out on the water. So the next session is equipment. Let's start with boats. Are they suitable for the task? And is the task achievable in that type of boat for those conditions and for the level, size and agility and ability of the students? For example, if we're teaching rudderless, we know that there are certain boats that work better than others, and they also work best with only a couple of people in. So that are the same weight as well. So it might make it a bit of a struggle to complete the task if we don't set that up properly. Are they rigged for the conditions, and do we have the correct sail controls on, or reefing lines attached, or masthead floats? Are they fit for purpose? Do they have the right gear on? Rigging faults, I'm sure you've all experienced this. Rigging faults are much easier to remedy ashore, but they take a lot of time out on the water once the session's running. Is the safety boat rigged, and is it ready? Is it reliable and maintained? And if using a safety boat driver or assistant, have they been briefed? Ideally, what we want from the safety boat is to be ready to hop in and go straight away. So can it be afloat before the students? And if so, let's do that. Now we need to think about the session kit. So what equipment do I need for the task? Are there enough? Are they ready and are they functioning? So lots of checking, lots of prepping here. Are they safe to stow in the boats, or might they cause damage or injury? And how will we manage that? If using a demo boat or a simulator, is it ready and is it checked? Do make sure that they are safe and stable. Lastly, in equipment is personal kit. So we have to ask ourselves some questions here. Am I prepared for common incidents or incidents associated with the activity? Is my knife a recommended type and fit for purpose? Do I have a radio if they're used at the centre? Do you have a watch, whistle, or any visual aids that you need? Am I dressed appropriately as a role model? And can I get in a dinghy or in the water? So personally, I find it much easier to be able to get in and out of dinghies for demos and also to get a closer look. Doing that with offshore kit and wellies, I find is not very practical. Do I have session notes and a notebook for taking notes on my students' progression? And can I plan my debrief? I've seen some great sessions that have been well planned and executed, and then the debrief ruins it all because it's just a simple well done. You've all done very well. So we do need to plan our debriefs, and taking notes therefore is vital. So last of the three sections is students. We want them to be safe, we want them to enjoy the session, and we also want them to learn something. Let's start with well-being. No matter how fun the session is, if the group is uncomfortable or cold or hungry, it just won't be enjoyable and they're unlikely to learn anything. So think about their size and agility and the boats and the time spent on the water. I'm immediately thinking of large adults in small single-handers here and the moaning that follows after. Are they kitted for their conditions? Are they fit and able enough for the amount of time on the water and the task? So some groups might need shorter sessions that need to be incorporated into the plan. Next up is whether the session is enjoyable. Mostly learning is an enjoyable experience if the aim is achieved. However, once that is achieved, a fun element to practice is a great idea. Can you present a new perspective if it's repetitive? Maybe this is a coaching session and your students have done it before, so maybe we can put a twist on it. And is everyone involved? Again, I've seen some instructors be so conscious of safety that they run the activity one boat at a time, which is not great value, and it simply gets boring for the other students. So next section, will the session be efficient? So does the session offer real value? Will they learn the skill and be able to move on? And how time efficient will the session be? Can it be improved with preparation? And the development of the session and the coaching here, how will differing abilities be managed? If they are bored, we need to challenge them. If they're struggling, we need to offer more coaching on the water and possibly after. If they're just okay, we need to allow them to practice. So in the planning stages, we need to consider what we might be able to do if they achieve the aim early on, and how we'll coach the ones that are lagging behind a little. Okay, so last on the very long list now is communication. In our planning, we want to ask, how will communication happen on the water as a group and as an individual? So how can attention be attracted? What hand signals need to be used? What sound signals can be used? And we need to plan this so that we can incorporate it into the brief. What visual aids best explain the task? What is feasible with the equipment, the staff and the conditions available? And would a demo be productive? Again, we need to look at staff briefings here. And let's also plan how the coach boat will be used and positioned for maximum effect. How will I communicate short vocal hints and how will I lock in for longer conversations? How will this be achieved and how will I brief it? Making these decisions beforehand will take a lot of the thought process out during the session, and then it's possible to brief the students so that they know what to expect. So the points to take away from this are planning, checking, and suitability, thinking about the what ifs, and at the end of the planning process, we need to think about plan B. What will be briefed to the students if there's an emergency? So from this, you'll be able to create a really well thought out brief and give yourself the best chance of running a session that you feel confident about. Now we'll hand over to Clive, who is going to talk about the structure and the session delivery.
Okay, thanks very much, Gemma. So that centered our thoughts about the pre-preparation, the planning, the thoughts about what we're going to do prior to going anywhere near the water. And having done all that presentation, we may want to create a detailed lesson plan. Now, if you look at W33, the Windsurfing Instructor Handbook, that does show an example of a lesson plan if you need one. You don't need to, but it may just get your thoughts concentrated around what the session will be. We need to plan the content and the delivery of our session. We need to include the safe, fun and learning, and also that we have maximum activity. All of that maximum activity is linked to the aim of the session. For example, if we're coming alongside the coach boat, whilst one dinghy is trying to do that component, the others are not just sailing backwards and forwards. They can be practicing coming along in the spill and fill zone, stopping alongside a mark or somewhere else, but their technique is being practiced. So not everybody is sailing around doing something aimlessly. So let's have a look at the structure for the actual on-water delivery. Remember that there may be a land drill or a theory session prior to actually going onto the water. And we're going to assume that we've completed all of those elements, and we're moving on to the on-water detail, which I think we know fall into three main parts, and that's the brief, then there's the on-water delivery phase, followed by the review. So I know in a previous CPD session, you've looked at the examples of delivery methods with Rachel and Tim. You've looked at the plan, approach, maneuver, escape, and the edicts. So what goes into the brief? Firstly, it must be succinct. It must be short and punchy, and it must be delivered just before the activity. What about the content? We must show the aim of the session. We must have this. We get that from the various publications, as Gemma alluded to earlier, the G11, the G4, G20, etc., etc. What we are going to do and the why. Why are we going to do it? Then we go into the safety, which includes a sailing area, the use whiteboards, pictures in the sand, including boundaries, and we point out on the water if we can, the launch and recovery in the holding area. So we need to include all of those in our brief. We also need to look at signals, including confirmation that they have received them and they understand what they're going to do. We need come to me, stop, or I'll come to you, or go home, or a variety. We'll have a look at those in detail slightly later. We need timings. How long are they going to be out there? How are we going to launch and recover? Is it just going to be a bombard blast back and out? So the control mechanism is in place. And where I will be as the instructor, where will I be positioned? Standing in the shallows, or will I be out in the coach boat? So they need to know where I will be. And then the final and critical phase of this is we ask confirmation from our students. Have they an understanding about what they're about to do? Do they know where the sailing area is? Do they know what the aim of the session is? Do they know what the signals are? So we have to have that confirmation before we let them go. So let's now drill down into the on-water delivery fundamentals. What am I actually looking at? Now, the instructor may want to give a practical demonstration of the water, so he paints or she paints a picture of what they are going to achieve. We'll come back to that in the debrief, maybe. The instructor must be on the water first. They control the launch as per the brief. They control the launching, which whatever method you want to. You may have set a holding area that they come and sail out to. And the instructor maintains the safety using the whistle and signals. Stop, go home, or come to me. The three basic signals that I would suggest that we use. And with beginners, maybe just the stop, and you use your coach boat to go alongside and have a conversation. Coaching. When we are out on the water, we need to deliver coaching, and it must be effective. And each student must get coaching. I try and talk about positive coaching techniques. Positive coaching is telling them what to do, not what they're doing wrong. So for example, if they need to sheet in or sheet out, sit in or sit out, they don't need to know what they're doing wrong. They need to know what to do to put it right. So you'd identify the fault and then think about what are they going to do to take that fault away. So that's positive coaching. Now that's easy if we're in a powerboat or inland waterways, because everybody is going to rotate around. The instructor is sat alongside them and they can have a look, debrief face to face. However, in a coach boat, that's slightly more difficult, so we have to control them. So how am I going to use the coach boat? We're going to use this and we're going to go into the phases of coaching. Now, the phases of coaching, there's no right or wrong, it's just different ways that I'm going to use my coach boat. They can sail past you, so you position yourself halfway along the course at either end, and the student is going to sail past you and you can have input. Now, the good thing about that is everybody knows where you are. Everybody will receive content, but it's only going to be a very short input. So again, as I said, sheet in, sheet out, sit in, sit out, more rudder, less rudder. So as they sail past, you have input. The other thing to do is to have a coaching conversation is you stop them. You go to them, furl the jib, centerboard up, kick her off. Now what you can do is you can lock the boat in. Obviously you kill the engine, put your leg over the sponson, lock the dinghy in, and now you can have a coaching conversation. You can have a two-way process. So that's a positive coming alongside, they stop, lock them in, good conversation. Or you can drive behind them and you can have input. Now that's an advanced skill and they need to be concentrating on the sailing and you need good driving skills. So they're what we call the phases of coaching. Whichever one you choose is right for you at that time to have input, whether it's point of focus, you want to have a conversation, or you need to see the technique going along. Of course, the other thing about part 3 is you can actually do video coaching too, which you can use in your debrief later. The other thing we need to think about is the position of our coach boat for the best effect, and we think about the phases of coaching. We need to control the entire fleet in case of single or multiple capsize. So if I have gone alongside, I also need to keep my head out of the boat to concentrate on the remainder of the fleet. And then I need to control the return to the shore to do the recovery. So at the end of the session, I take the students to an area and we recover as per the brief. Then the last is the review. This is a critical element, as Gemma alluded to earlier. You've made notes on the water, you're now going to feed that back to the students. So we need to have an opening summary and we refer back to the aim of the session. What was it we were going to do and how we were going to do it? If you've done a demo, you could actually say, so what you saw me do. We can use one of the RYA models for our review, and we'll look at that in another CPD module later on. So there's a separate webinar going to be done on that. We need to feed back to the group as a whole. But we also, and more importantly, need to feed back to each student what they did well, and then also what are their development issues. And we need to give them on what it is they need to do to put that right. Then, if possible, we try and get a summary from the students. And then we look forward to the next session. So we have a lot of this information in the RYA publications specific to the disciplines. So you have W33 for the windsurfing scheme, G19 for the instructor scheme, the powerboat scheme. We have G14 for the national sailing scheme and the youth sailing scheme. And also we have the yachtmaster scheme. In the power scheme, there's also the PW and the inland waterways. All of those publications have information about running sessions. Other resources we have on the website, we have the senior instructor workbook. And now in there is a very good section on reviewing and structuring of sessions. And there's the link if you want to find that. And also the effective use of a powerboat for on-water training and coaching. That's provided as a resource that you can download and use. And again, there is the link for that. So in summary, we've looked at the pre-planning. Gemma looked at what are our thoughts, what are our constraints, what are we going to do before we even construct our sessions. Then we looked at the actual detailed construct, the brief, the on-water delivery, and the review at the end, following the safe, fun, and learning. And then, most importantly, the review. What does the review look like as a group and also specific to individuals? So that's the end of our webinar today. I'd like to thank Gemma very much for her input at the beginning. I'd like to thank everybody for watching this. And of course, if you do have any questions, then please contact the RYA. So I bid you farewell and speak to you again soon.
Thank you very much, Clive and Gemma. That brings us to the end of this webinar, and we look forward to seeing you at the next one. Thank you very much.